Hold on a second. Crash Bandicoot Warped isn't the worst in the series? That's not possible. Well, my friend, it is. And I'm going to tell you why. See, Crash Bandicoot Warped has some problems, some basic flaws. The first of which is that it is overloaded with gimmicks. There are more gimmicks in most cases than there are regular platforming levels. And that could be because the developers wanted to differentiate themselves from other platformers, so they increased the quantity of gimmicks. Now, previous Crash Bandicoot games have had gimmicks. There are, for example, space levels in Crash Bandicoot 2. There are levels like the one that you are seeing right now where you're running away from a Triceratops. Or in other games it's a boar. But they've always had a limited number of gimmicks. I think the quantity of gimmicks spoiled the quality of the entirety of the game. Each and every gimmick, whether you're flying a plane or you're going underwater or doing Wave Racer, there's no evolution between the levels because there are so many different ones and there are so few levels for them to evolve. There's no power-ups in the flight level. There's no evolution, like there's no interesting or new enemies that you can find in the Wave Racer levels. It's just a little bit more difficult every single time, and Crash Bandicoot really prides itself on the quality of each and every level. So when you have such an abundance, the quality of the platforming levels even will deteriorate because there's such a gap in between them. There's no room to build diversity of mechanics or like level design. There's no room to increase the difficulty because the player will be cooled down from that experience. If they had have taken the Crash Bandicoot formula, added new gimmicks, which they did in Crash Bandicoot 2, and then just fixed up those games, like improved upon those 2 or 3 levels, the game would have been better. There's also a power-up system that was added to give Crash an edge, and power-ups are great in platformers. Like, for example, in Crash Bandicoot Warped, you can get a bazooka, you can get a hover jump, a AoE ground slam. Like, these are all power-ups, but because of the infrequency of like levels where you utilize these power-ups, because they are not utilized in gimmick levels whatsoever, there's very little evolution of not even evolution. Let me correct that, sorry. There is no room to implement it into the game in any other form than as a cheat. Like, let's take, for example, being able to hover jump or use a bazooka to attack enemies. There's nowhere you go back into the game through replayability where it feels like using this is less than a cheat, where you're just making the game easier for yourself. It's not implemented into the design of the levels. It's not implemented into the layout to utilize these in the future as you would in other platformers, and where this is a skill-focused platformer where you have to be on top of your game at all times, it's just not good. And I think that's where a lot of people get that feeling of, well, it's just so many gimmicks, it's so little quality, so little of what Crash is. And yeah, I agree with that. It detracts from itself just by its variety. And I think, though, the basic levels are good. They don't have time to evolve. They don't have time to make really interesting layouts. Like, you go through levels and there's very little identity to them beyond themes. I could list any number of Crash Bandicoot 2 levels and how they play out, or Crash Bandicoot 1, but I can't really name any warped levels. And that's literally because all of the design ties into each other in a way where it detracts. there's so little room for each level and each world to have identity where it's just being spread too thin. The strength comes into play that each level has a really good quality to it. Each level has a how to put this? It has clarity in its design. It's easy to see how you'll be hit, how you'll fall into pits. There's no difficulty spikes. It's quality all around on every single regular level, and that's one of the strengths. The earliest Crash Bandicoot games did not have anywhere near the quality or polish on the platforming levels that Warped has, and that's very important. That differentiates itself from its predecessors more than its gimmicks did. Not to mention that the gimmicks themselves, where they weren't polished as well as they could have been, ended up causing the game to not age well, to not hold up. The gimmicks are a little bit frustrating to play, they're a bit repetitive, and they definitely don't have the control that newer games, or games that would have held up, are expected to have. Although the platforming levels and the bosses are a real treat. They're fun to play. The water levels, even though they are a gimmick level, they're solid enough by themselves that if they had have had time, if they had have had more levels, could have been way better as well. It controls really well. It doesn't feel like you're in a situation where you're underwater and you can't control your character, or you're going through really small, tight areas that are frustrating. It's fun to play through. The entirety of the game is fun to play through, and that's important. Even if the gimmicks mechanics don't hold up, the quality of control, the quality of play is important, and that's what separates Warped from its predecessors. I strongly believe that Warped is better than Crash Bandicoot 1, and I believe it holds up through the quality of play, not through the variety. The variety was a clear mistake, I think. Oh, and the bosses. Can't forget the bosses. The bosses in Warped, while not amazing, are the best in the entire franchise. They are the most fun to play through because they have the same Crash Bandicoot style of trying to stay alive so that you can get to the opponent's weakness, but also the gimmicks that are mixed in are improved ever so slightly, such as the space shooty level where you're fighting a boss and he has very large weak points that are easy to hit and really interesting patterns and lots of incoming bullets. Way more fun than the basic game. There's also quality bosses that aren't like waiting for a boss to jump next to a TNT barrel. None of that anymore. That's all gone. It's all you have to survive. You have to survive a pattern, and then you counterattack the boss, and the patterns can become quite intense. And there's no last boss gimmick this time. Overall, Crash Bandicoot Warped oozes a lot of quality in its platforming and its difficulty and its player engagement and how compelling it is, but it loses points on the amount of gimmicks that it has. Oh, and also the amount of collectibles are great too. It gets points for replayability through collectibles and through also coming back with power-ups, but it loses points on the amount of gimmicks, the unevolution of its design in levels, and that's about it, I think. Yeah, that's about it. Do I believe Crash Bandicoot Warped holds up nowadays? Absolutely. 100% holds up. I think it's a fun game. I think it is the second best Crash game in the entire Crash series. It is not as bad as I've heard. It's just gimmick heavy and could have used a little bit more direction and a little bit more focus. That's it for me for now. I'm out. If you like this, please let me know in the comments. Give me a like if you dislike this or you think I rambled. Please let me know in the comments. I would love to know. And If you want to see more of these, give me a subscribe or a game suggestion. I really want to know more old classic games to go through, talk about, and dissect. For now, that's it for me. I'm out. Bye bye.